as I sit here in the rain in Memphis, which is all going to seem very ironic when I start talking about the film, one of the things that crossed my mind is just how each decade, each era, has its defining pop culture tentpoles. The TV shows, the movies, the artists, the singers, the books. That last one you don't think of too much, but it is true. Each generation and each decade kind of has authors and works that are synonymous with that time period. The 2000s, J.K. Rowling definitely is kind of the author of that time period. You recognize her work and you know her work even if you've never read one or seen any of the movies based on it. And we had a couple of those in the 90s. Michael Crichton kind of took off after Jurassic Park. Stephen King was always real popular, but one of the guys that really ruled the roost in the mid-90s was John Grisham. If you weren't there, I don't think you can really appreciate how big he was. His work, his books, and the movies based on his books were big business. They tended to attract the big name A-listers. They were talked about, they were referenced. It started with The Firm with Tom Cruise, and they did The Pelican Brief with Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington. Then later came The Client with Tommy Lee Jones and Susan Sarandon, and then Time to Kill with Samuel L. Jackson. And these were all big hits. But as the decade kind of progressed and we got towards the end of it, he started dipping down a little bit in influence. And it's kind of funny that 1997's The Rainmaker is probably the least remembered of the film adaptations of his work up to that point. I don't remember it causing a big stink. Nobody talked about it. It was kind of in the theaters one day and gone the next, which is kind of funny in hindsight when you consider that, if nothing else, directorially, it definitely had the best pedigree. Francis Ford Coppola directed this, whereas, Sidney Pollack, a good director, nothing against him, did The Firm. Somebody whose name I don't even remember did The Pelican Brief. Joel Schumacher, who would go on to, Hollywood infamy with his Batman films, did The Client and A Time to Kill. So you think that this one would kind of get the boost on that, but I think Grisham's influence was kind of dipping down, which is a shame because I think this is the best one out of them, and the fact that it's the least remembered is kind of bizarre. If anything it's remembered for now, it's that this is the movie that dropped right before Matt Damon blew up. If you look on the DVD, if you can look right there at the top, it says Matt Damon, above the title. That is not the way it was when this movie came out. When this movie came out in 97. Good Will Hunting also came out in 97. But this movie dropped first. Dropped, little fanfare, kind of fizzled out. And a few months later, Good Will Hunting happened, and boom, overnight. That old joke about, in Hollywood it takes you 15 years to become an overnight sensation. That's exactly what happened. Overnight, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon became, A-listers. So this film kind of has that distinction of being that film that he did just before he became a household name. Matter of fact, if you look at when I was looking at the posters and everything, trying to find the intro stuff for this, none of the posters really advertise him in it. But above the title, it says 5-time Academy Award-winning director, Francis Ford Coppola. Matt Damon's not even a figurehead. Now, all the advertising, all the boxes and things have his name above the title. Kind of telling. So anyway, let's delve into this. So what is this movie about? Well, it's about what all John Grisham novels are about. If anybody remembers, there was a TV show called Third Rock from the Sun about these aliens who come to Earth, and they're trying to fit in to learn about us and all this. And in one episode, they're trying to be more normal, perceived as, kind of normal Americans and whatnot. And they're all sitting around reading John Grisham novels, and one of them pipes up with, well, my John Grisham novel is about a young Southern lawyer who takes on an evil corporation. Hey, that's what my John Grisham novel's about. Mine too. So they all switch books and just keep reading uninterrupted because all the plots are essentially the same. So Matt Damon is our young Southern lawyer. This case taking place in beautiful Memphis, Tennessee, shot on location as well. Side note to this, one of the things I kind of rediscovered the last time I watched this, before this time, the school that he goes to law school at is actually the college I went to grad school at. Only back then it was still called Memphis State, now the University of Memphis. So it was really cool to see the school I was going to, represented. It was like, hey, all right. Anyway, so Matt Damon is fresh out of law school, just about to take the bar. He gets hired by a kind of shady law firm, which is there just to kind of provide color for the characters. It doesn't really factor into the main story. It factors into the subtext, but not the main story. And through kind of this workshop, he ends up representing several different clients, primarily a low-income family whose son is dying of leukemia and whom the insurance company has refused to pay any money on. So they're suing the insurance company, and Matt Damon is the lawyer going to represent them. As I said, it's filled with a lot of colorful characters. Once again, not just with the pedigree of the director. I think this film of the John Grisham movies had the best cast, definitely, by a long shot, as far as I'm concerned. So along with Matt Damon, baby Matt Damon, you had Claire Danes, who hadn't quite hit yet with her TV show, but was about to. You had Danny DeVito, Jon Voight, Danny Glover, Mickey Rourke. I mean, you had a who's who of great character actors in this. And I think that combination of the veteran character actors and the rookie leads is part of what makes this film great. The others in the John Grisham series, they had movie stars. Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, Julia Roberts. Decent to great actors, depending on which one we're talking about. But they were very much hyped on the star power of the people in them. This one, I think, made the smart chance of going with, at that time, a relative unknown. Matt Damon had done movies before this. But as far as I can tell, this was definitely the biggest one he had done up to that time, working with the biggest cast, working with the most famous director, and I think this is one of the first ones he had the lead in, where he was the main character. So he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So watching him act, you can tell, and if this is just his acting, then he's even better than I thought he was. But there is this look in him of just being nervous as fuck. Now, the character is supposed to be nervous as fuck. But I think having a younger actor with a couple movies to his name, now sharing the screen with some of the biggest names of the time, being directed again, five-time Academy Award winner. That's a lot for a kid. That's a lot for anybody on their first time. I'm 41 years old, and if they called me up and said, we want to do this, I'd piss myself every scene. So I think that natural nervousness, that natural feeling yourself out, plays well with the character. And Matt Damon is a good enough actor that he is able to take the nervousness I think he actually is feeling and translate it into the character that he's playing, of someone who is spent 3 years in law school learning, the the theory of the law, but now has to practice it in the real world with unscrupulous lawyers, ambulance chasers, and basically trying to discover the difference between what he's been taught and what he has to learn. So I think having a young man like that in that role, brilliant. He gives a great performance. Not as strong as some of the ones he was gonna give, not even a year later. It's not as good as Good Will Hunting, but it's still, you can tell that this guy is going to be a major player. I see the same things in him watching this that I see when I watch Michael B. Jordan, when I saw him in Creed, going, this fucking guy is going to rule the roost. And it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Claire Danes, who also went on to great things. Now, I always felt she deserved a little bit better in terms of her film career. She's had a very successful television career, so I don't think she would complain. I always felt like she had the charisma to kind of carry it over to film a little bit more, but, does a great job here as a woman he's representing, or trying to represent, who's being beaten mercilessly by her husband. Her husband being played by actor Andrew Shue, whose claim to fame was playing Billy on Melrose Place. Just throwing that out there. But these two young leads are plopped down in the middle of this big story, and they're the emotional through line, and they pull it off very well. Like I said, you see the seeds of greatness in the performance, the subtlety, the nuance. They're not big out there, I'm Tom Cruise. It's like, this is before he was Matt Damon. This is when he was that kid, and I think it was a smart move. Backing them up is, again, just a murderer's row of outstanding character actors. There's a term in wrestling of getting someone over. Getting them popular and making them look strong and making them look good. And one of the general theories is, if you want the new kid to look good, you put him in the ring with one of the veterans. You want Sting and Lex Luger to go over, you put him in there with Ric Flair. You want Shawn Michaels, Diesel, the British Bulldog to look good, you put him in there with Bret Hart. And here, making these two kids look extremely good, you've got Danny DeVito, Danny Glover, John Voight, Mickey Rourke, just amazing talent in there. All of them playing these very colorful characters that Matt Damon has to kind of bump across. What I also love about this one is, I think, unlike some of the other Grisham books and movies, this one's a lot more subtle in what the movie is actually about. The concept of the young lawyer taking on the greedy corporation is, of course, the framing. But what this story is actually about is this kid learning about the real world and the ugliness of the real world, especially in the profession that he's chosen. And you have two lawyers on both ends of the spectrum. You have him, the young idealist, and you have John Voight, a corrupt lawyer who has no problem doing dirty tricks, bugging offices and shit. And so they're on the two ends of the spectrum. There's a great scene where Matt Damon asks him, do you even remember the first time you sold out? And as the movie goes along, and as he's trying to sue this big company, and as he's trying to help this young lady, get away from her abusive husband, and while he's trying to help this older woman, hide her money from, ungrateful children and all this, with each case, at least once, in some cases multiple times, he crosses the line. He does something unethical because because in the situation he had to, or he felt it was the thing he had to do in that moment for the greater good, for the good of his client, or whatever. But we always see that he is very much aware that what he's doing is wrong, and that there was a better way to do it, the legal way, the right way, and he deliberately chose the opposite because that was the world he felt he was thrust into. And, you know, spoiler alert there, you know, at the end of the film, he makes the decision that he doesn't want to practice the law anymore because, and he has this great ending monologue where he says, every client I have is going to expect the same magic, they're going to expect the same results, and I can probably give it to them as long as I don't care how I do it. And one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be Jon Voight's character. I almost called him Leo Drummond, but that's the guy from Inherit the Wind. Jon Voight's character's name was Drummond. So I think having that through line and using all of this other stuff as the framework for just, you know, that youthful optimism being very slowly kind of peeled away, and having a character recognize that it's being peeled away and making the choice not to want to go down that route, to find a better way, is an interesting one. I think it was one that really worked for them. Is this movie perfect? No, it's a little long. It drags a bit, I will say. The casting and the acting is good pretty much across the board, but again, I feel like sometimes I'm watching the Adam West Batman show where you have Adam West playing it straight and all of the other characters are mugging so big for the camera that it's jarring. Now you can tell that they're doing that to be a contrast to Damon. You are seeing them through his eyes. He's our point of view character. But there's not a lot of nuance to the other characters. Again, there's no bad acting in this. Danny DeVito making now his third appearance on Forgotten Gems. Congratulations, Danny. Is fantastic as this kind of lawyer who goes into business with Matt Damon. So Danny DeVito is the ambulance chaser. He's the guy who's kind of learned how to survive. You know, he doesn't really have lofty ideals. He wants money. He wants to make a living. He's not a bad guy, but his respect for the law and respect for, you know, ethics are questionable, and we see that, and Matt Damon sees that in him. Jon Voight, if there is a bad performance, I think it might have to go to Jon Voight, just because he is really hamming it up as this evil lawyer, you know, who has no scruples, no remorse. He's just an evil bastard. And he plays that role great. And again, since we're seeing all these characters through Matt Damon's eyes, that's how he sees the guy. So he's playing it great, but there are sometimes he just, especially since all the actors, you know, Damon, Claire Danes, and Jon Voight are all putting on these a little bit overdone accents. You know, he has really come off a, well, son, well, Your Honor, I just don't know. You know, he's come off just a little too much. You know, I think he kind of could have pulled it back a little bit. Danny Glover is fucking awesome. He plays the judge. They originally have a different judge in the case, played by Dean Stockwell, who hates Matt Damon, and he's slimy and gross, and he's corrupt and all, and he ends up dying, and they replace him with Danny Glover, who is this civil rights activist and the guy who hates insurance companies, and he's just digging into Jon Voight and all this thing. So Danny Glover's fucking great in this. I love him. His judge character is fantastic. Kind of that character you hope and pray more judges are like. Again, Claire Danes is fantastic. Again, a little bit of a thankless role, but I think she fills it with a lot of depth. She's a character, especially at the age she was when she made this, that you instantly feel for, mainly because the first time we see her, she's in the hospital bandaged all the shit. He beat her with a baseball bat. But she's just got those big doe eyes and this very innocent look, and you can tell right away that's a person you wanna protect. You know, you want to be the big brother to, and step in front of the bully to make sure no one hurts her. So you're right there with Matt Damon when he's doing that. I will say, this is neither a plus or a minus. It's just kind of a statement. Boy, the domestic violence stuff in this is hard to watch. Now that's in a way good because it meant they did their jobs, but the makeup, the bruising, the attacks are pretty brutal. In fact, in some cases, they are a little too brutal. There is a scene, so Andrew Shue beats Claire Danes, horribly. She's in the hospital. That's where we first meet her. And Matt Damon is sitting at the cafeteria and watching them together. And all of a sudden, Andrew Shue starts shouting and throwing cups around and throwing chairs and yelling at her in the middle of this fucking crowded, cafeteria. Now, I don't give a fuck if nobody else in that cafeteria had the balls to stand up and get in front of this guy and this woman who's bandaged all this shit. So even if you had no idea what was going on, you can put one and one together and know what the hell happened. So nobody gets up, and furthermore, no fucking hospital security is called in to get his ass out of there and tell him, no, you're not coming back in here. I mean, I know it was the 90s. I know we were stupid, but come on. So again, you take it with a grain of salt because, again, on the one hand, we're seeing everything through Matt Damon's character's eyes. But on the other, as I've said before, when one character is playing something so very, very naturally and trying to appear as an everyman, when other characters are playing it so very broad, it stands out more. Things like that really stand out. Side note, though, I must say, and this movie obviously came out years before I moved to Tennessee, but it is neat to see the sights, the ID things. There's the pyramid, there's the bridge, Memphis State. I should have worn my Memphis Blues for this, is what I should have done. But anyway, so it's neat to kind of pick stuff out. I don't really have that luxury a lot, being from Alaska, since most films about Alaska are not filmed in Alaska, and they can't even be bothered to pronounce the names of things correctly. So there's a couple movies I can do. There's my friend who was in the background of that shot. So it was really neat to be able to ID those things in the film. That's just me. Anyway, I got off track. I think this is an interesting legal drama that is a careful and clever disguise for something that is a character piece. At the core, it is about the question of ethics, about who you want to become and how you want to do things, how far you're going to go for what's right. Real quick, I'm full of metaphors today. I'm sure some people are watching going, that's not the only thing you're full of. Anyway, this reminds me of way back in the day. I read one of those Star Wars Expanded Universe books. Yeah. But in it, I always remember they had this great section where someone is explaining the dark side. He says, do you know why Jedi always cut off someone's hand? It's because if you cut off their hand, you're stopping the immediate problem. If you kill the person, then you eliminate the option for them to ever make good or do better. You're making the judgment that you're going to kill them, that there'll never be anything else, and they deserve to die. And sometimes you're in a battle, you're in a war, and you do it. You kill the person. And you justify it by saying, well, this person was going to kill me, this person was going to, kill this other person. So you justify it. So you've moved the line a little. So then you come to the next one and you say, well, that person was bad, this person's worse, I should kill him too. You've moved the line again, and you move it again, and you move it again, until before you even know it, the dark side has you. And I think that is what this film does very well, is illustrates that, is that each time Matt Damon is corrupted a little bit. And he makes the choice to recognize that corruption. It's very different from, say, a Macbeth character or any Shakespearean villain who says, you know, I have waded halfway through a river of blood, and if I go forward and reach my goal, I'm going to have to go through just as much blood as if I turn around and go back the other way and try to make amends, so I may as well just keep going. You know, he's a character who sees the consequences and makes the choice to try to change it. You don't see that a lot. And I think it's very subtly done. Great performance by Matt Damon, subtle direction by Francis Ford Coppola, and a great cast backing him up. So if you haven't seen this one in a while, go check it out. All right. So there we have it. I've done a lot of these recently. I just looked back and saw how many of these I've done. Probably going to take just a short break, watch some other stuff, but we'll be back because I'm here as long as this goes on, folks. We're all in this together. I should really rephrase that because I hate that fucking song. But anyway, keep calm and carry on. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.